Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. In the first year of the crossover, I looked at a meetup between the Man of Steel and the wisecracking wall crawler, which was their second story together because that's what I owned. Today, I'm taking issue with Superman vs. the Amazing Spider-Man, not only their first crossover, but the first ever Marvel-DC superhero collaboration, because I'm not counting that Wizard of Oz adaptation they did. Written by Jerry Conway, with art by Ross Andrew, Dick Giordano, and Jerry Serpe, hope I pronounced that right. Let's crack open this one-shot and see if it makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover is really cool. The two stars high above a beautifully detailed Manhattan glaring at each other to add emphasis to the verses in the title. The intro page has the same vibe, and the same labels like Greatest Team Up and Battle of the Century. Though now they're much lower to the ground, and Soups looks a tad less intense. We begin with a giant robot menacing Metropolis, walking right through buildings on a 2-page spread. This reboot of Megas XLR just doesn't have the charm of the original show. Superman arrives, finding the machine is lead-lined to block his X-ray vision, as a voice from inside declares his ultimate victory is at hand.
"Ah, Superman, I was hoping you'd show up. Can you help me find my car keys? I think I dropped them around here somewhere."
The machine is formidable, able to knock Soups back and repel him with an inertia ray that sends him flying uncontrollably. While our hero uses a burst of super speed to free himself off-panel, the bot rips off the roof of Star Labs, takes a component from a console, then tosses it into its mouth. Oh, so it stomped through the city because it was hangry. It's so obvious in hindsight. Big Blue tries to trip the behemoth from underground, but a device in the Robofoot hits him with 10 times the gravity of Krypton. However, he knows what that feels like. Realizing it's intended to keep the mech stable enough to walk, he plants it into the ground, putting the threat to a stop. That's his Kansas farm boy instincts at work. For the next several weeks, he'll be watering it, giving it shade when it gets too sunny, and waiting for more robots to sprout up. "A good move, Superman. Unfortunately, not quite good enough." Sheesh, narration captions got really passive-aggressive in the 70s. The bot's head fires into the sky, and Superman flies up to stop it, only to find it empty when it breaks apart. It was a decoy, so Lex Luthor could pop out of the main body and jetpack away with the computer module. Soups later flies to Galaxy Communications, where at this time, Clark Kent was a news anchor working for Morgan Edge, who owned the Daily Planet, hence why the rest of the usual staff is there. They've gathered for a meeting regarding a world news conference in New York they're flying to that evening, when Jimmy Olsen interrupts to show a Channel 2 newscast about the robot attack. After exposition about most smashed buildings being empty, and the stolen module having been designed to operate the direction of orbiting satellites, Edge blames Clark for not covering this story first. "I've been a fool. A regular dodo." Makes sense. Kryptonians are basically extinct too. What, too soon? "I could kick myself from here to the moon. Literally."
To the moon, Alice!
He heads back out in costume, berating himself. He searched the robot's body for the module, but didn't think until now to follow the mech's tracks back to their source, leading him to the bay. He dives underwater to discover a walking lab that grabs him with an extension arm on approach and allows him inside. He admits to being surprised it was Lex Luthor behind the theft, hoping to destroy his greatest enemy, and tries appealing to their former friendship, hoping it could be renewed one day. This is working from the continuity that had a teenage Clark, as Superboy, accidentally cause his buddy Lex to permanently lose all his hair, thus creating their rift. Too bad Jor-El forgot to add the crystal with Krypton's cure for baldness in Baby Cal's ship. Lex activates a web of high-intensity lasers, powerful enough to hurt Soups, but he recognizes the pattern and makes it through. He'd have caught Lex right then and there, if not for a red sun laser from the villain's glove hitting his eyes, blinding him temporarily. Seizing the opportunity, Baldy sends the component he pilfered through a pneumatic tube to another hideout, until he can retrieve it later, then starts hitting Superman with his laser glove again. Getting weaker with each shot, Soups uses heat vision on the bulkhead, causing a breach and flooding the lab.
"You burned down the wall!"
No, he melted the wall. Melted. Because it's made of metal. I thought you were a scientist. Our hero takes his nemesis to the authorities, then narrowly joins his friends and co-workers for their flight to the Big Apple. And in case this is read by anyone that lived in a cave their whole lives, we get a page of Superman's origin, doomed planet, last hope, kindly couple, and all that. A little weird that it says he fights for truth, justice, and the Terran way, which, considering that refers to humans in general, seems pretty conflicting, what with us being such a complex and diverse species and all. We finally get to the co-star Spider-Man, spotting some thieves on the roof of a museum. They would have gotten away sooner, but were so bored just being in a museum they kept falling asleep. After setting up his camera, the webhead drops in on the guys who look like they're cosplaying as those tiny green army men figures. He takes them down in short order, then encounters their boss, Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus. One of his upgrades in his pursuit of crime includes an airship called the Flying Octopus.
Yeesh! And I thought the Spider-Mobile was a fiasco.
No one wanted to license that thing out as a toy, not even Duplo. The ensuing brawl has Spidey thrown over the roof, which he blames on acting like a show-off instead of fighting seriously, so swings back up to tackle Ock again. Just as it seems he's got the upper hand, he's bonked by one of the Flying Octopus's mechanical arms. I guess his Spidey sense was on a coffee break. This allows the not-so-good doctor and his minions to escape just as police arrive on the scene. Naturally, they assume Spidey is part of the theft and try to arrest him, so he tries to web swing away, finding himself out of web fluid and having to run from gunfire instead. And even this doesn't make him wish the Spider-Mobile was still around. After grabbing his camera, he returns to the Daily Bugle as Peter Parker, confidently handing over his film of the Ock-Spidey fight and exclusives of the villain's new aircraft. Jonah delightedly has the pics developed for the Night Owl edition and instructs that the best shot on the roll be used for page 1. He happily lets Peter rest on his couch, even using JJ's coat as a pillow, and if you've ever seen a sitcom, you know the other shoe is about to drop. After 45 minutes, the copies are ready and out the door to newsstands. But, as we see, the best picture used for the front page is an incomplete shot of Spidey and Ock fighting, indistinct because the camera wasn't synchronized properly. Jonah, with his usual measured reaction, literally tries to murder Parker in his office, figuring this was somehow intentional. JJ may be too angry to see it, but he shares some of the blame here. Sure, Parker gave a really competent pitch, but it was the boss man who ordered the fast track on a story he only heard bullet points of without actually seeing the photos themselves. Robbie Robertson mentions he could have helped on the matter if he'd been around, but I guess he was busy getting prank called by the living embodiment of comedic effect. Mary Jane is there so she and Pete can catch a movie, but once outside, his spider sense alerts him to a passing blimp, and he sadly has to ditch the redhead to put his webs back on, even if it strains their relationship.
But there's some things more important than Gone with the Wind.
Hopefully nothing screws up our plans next week.
We've got tickets to see Saturday night. Live!
He makes his way up a skyscraper, jumps, and despite the bad angle and still being out of webbing, manages to glide onto the balloon, which he breaks through, revealing it as a facade for the Flying Octopus. Spidey had placed a tracer on the surprised Octavius earlier, which is what set off his spider sense, and another fight ensues.
I'll dismember you for this wall crawler! Fat chance, Tubbo!
Where's that coming from? You need to get your eyes checked, Peter, 'cause Otto's pretty trim. He clearly works out in between heists. The blimp crashes into the Central Park Reservoir, where Spider-Man knocks Ock out and leaves him for the cops, while internally monologuing that the villain probably ditched his crew and hoped to escape the city incognito. For now, Peter intends to find MJ, but doesn't see her until the next morning, when she joins him and the Bugle crew for the World News Conference at the Coliseum. Don't recall ever seeing that word with one L, but no time for that, because we need a refresher on the Wallcrawler's backstory. Well, we don't, but maybe some folks in 1976 did. We go to New Mexico, home to the world's most escape-proof prison, Federal Maximum X Security Penitentiary No. 1. You can really tell the governor let his 5-year-old name it as a birthday present. It's where Ock is being held, as well as his new neighbor, Lex Luthor, with the guards confident that after being searched and the cells equipped with video and audio monitoring, he can't get out. It's not like you can use that conveniently close broom handle to lift the keys off Larry the narcoleptic watchman or something. Well, that's lunch, people. The villains get talking, Luthor suggesting they team up and make a trade, which Ock interprets as swapping enemies. He agrees sarcastically since he expects they'll stay locked up thanks to the security cameras. But neither he nor the security guards had planned for Lex to have a bunch of small mechanical parts hidden under a strip of fake skin on his forearm. Oldest trick in the book, really. He constructs sonic disruptors that incapacitate the guards and a watch to broadcast energy so Octavius can regain the use of his previously deactivated arms and bust open their cells. Lex protected himself from the Sonics thanks to some earplugs which he shares with Ock, who gives his new partner a piggyback ride out of the prison. End of prologue. One more page, then begin. That's right, folks. 35 pages, not including hero identifications, and it's all been prologues. The actual story hasn't begun yet. Up is blue, the sky is aardvark. Stop mocking me, baby carrots! Of course, the antagonists need some backstory too, but because they're evil, they have to share a page. Also, I guess on top of Superboy costing him his hair, Luthor also lost a vital experiment to create life, adding to his hatred of Supes. Experiment to create life? Was Lex putting the moves on his girlfriend in hopes of losing his virginity at the time? We, I guess formally, now begin with Chapter 1, Duel of the Titans, with Daily's Bugle and Planet staff arriving at the World News Conference. Frankly, Lois, the city is too filthy for my taste.
But you grew up on a farm.
A clean farm. We washed the animals every night before bed. You could eat off those pigs.
Backing away, backing away.
Peter intended to just relax with MJ, take a holiday, but Jonah wants a word with him, saying how a hard-working photog deserves some time off, and that he'd never given Parker a vacation, because he's not hard-working or diligent, and with a twisted smile and madness in his gaze, suggests he may not even be a photographer.
I'm going to go ahead and give you a pass because you have murder eyes.
Not exactly following the example of Dr. Cox, Pete instead tells Jonah off for playing nice 1 minute, then backstabbing the next, walking away and saying Flat Top can find him if he wants him. MJ quickly catches up to him, praising his dramatic display like he had nails for breakfast. I wish I can only afford second-hand pushpins from the Salvation Army. Whatever came over him, it was certainly satisfying, what with his boss deriding him since he was in high school.
Careful, Tiger. You'll date yourself. That's what you say about my jokes about President Ford falling down a lot, and those will never go out of style.
Clark and Lois are observing the display of ComLab 1, a sophisticated communication satellite that NASA has been staying quiet about in regards to whatever experiments it's going to run. He overhears Morgan Edge talking with an associate until he gets pulled into the conversation. The other guy, Tony Short, is programming director for the country's largest food chain, and wants to sponsor global communications coverage of the conference. But since Kent lacks national recognition, they'd prefer someone better known, like Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather. Edge literally blows smoke in Clark's face, then conveniently turns away as the farm boy cleans his glasses, with the boss threatening that such a temporary arrangement may be more indefinite if the ratings tick up. Lois, also not seeing her colleague's exposed face, asks if he's going to just let Edge take away the biggest story of his career, and Clark says yes, leading Lois to storm off, furious at his timidity. Fact is, Clark hopes he gets replaced with Dan Rather. He's been holding on to a rather not pun for years, and this may be his chance to finally use it. Lane goes to get some pics of ComLab, where she happens to meet Peter Parker, and given their shared profession, they've heard of each other. It's after he starts inquiring if the planet needs a new photographer when MJ intervenes, calling him Wolf instead of Tiger, which must be a downgrade. He introduces the ladies, and Lois senses some cattiness from the ginger, assuring that Peter's a bit too young for her. Then who should show up but the Superman of her dreams, who shoots sparkle vision at the two women, and they disappear, making Parker's first time seeing Supes quite bewildering. Like that Disney World trip when he was 7 and saw Minnie Mouse take her head off to reveal a hairy chain smoker named Greg in the suit. Equally stunned Clark directs Parker to the phone booths, which are more like open stalls. Not so great for changing into superhero garb, so he heads to the roof. Upon suiting up, his spider sense tingles something fierce, and the heroes finally meet on a 2-page spread, beginning Chapter 2, When Heroes Clash. What are you talking about? They're both wearing red and blue. They don't clash whatsoever. Far below, on the streets surrounding Manhattan's Columbus Circle, eyes turn skyward and pedestrians stare. And honestly, Pilgrim, can you blame them? Narration boxes by guest writer John Wayne. Superman wants an explanation for what Web Boy has done, or he'll be sorry. Yeah, based on his background, Clark assumed the guy who swings through the city and catches thieves like flies had something to do with his doppelganger.
Son, you are dumber than a bowl of mice.
But is only now having doubts since Spidey is asking him to explain. Supes was scheduled to appear at the convention, but we see it was a disguised Luthor showing up early, presumably using unspecified tech to fly and disappear the ladies. Watching their foes from a distance with Ock, Lex decides to give the webhead a little advantage, hitting him with a temporary charge of red sun radiation. Since it's not really a danger, kinda makes sense his spider sense wouldn't buzz. Supes tries to call time out, suggesting a mistake has been made, but Spider-Man isn't really listening, and clocks the Man of Steel on a splash page, knocking him down. This can only help the webhead's reputation. Not really caring how the vigilante managed such power, Supes tries going on the offensive, only to be struck again by a swinging kick. Peter even admits to himself how confusing this is, since he's never been able to knock around someone so reportedly strong. Superman insists he's trying to talk to the web spinner, and he'd better calm down, but all Parker wants is to know where Mary Jane is, and clobbers the overrated Kryptonian again. Fed up with this, Clark decides to teach him a lesson, about to throw a serious punch, but realizes midway it would likely be fatal. He holds back at the last second, avoiding contact, but the wind blast has enough force to send Spidey flying on another splash page.
This is a cool way to die!
Crashing through a couple windows only makes Pete angrier, and when he meets his target again, he decides to cartwheel launch himself at him. Will you listen to me? You could try your luck and say the name Martha, but I can tell you right now, not gonna work with this one. Just before the attack lands, the radiation boost wears off, and Spidey bounces off the S-shield like a rubber ball. Unsure what's going on, but fiercely determined to rescue MJ, he tries rapid anime-style punches, while Superman just stands there, until Parker is certain he's broken his hands. Some people eat nails for breakfast. I drink a gallon of wet cement every morning. Supes apologizes, and they have a chat, realizing that they've been tricked, and agree to join forces to find the perpetrators. This brings us to Chapter 3, The Call of Battle, which always shows up as unknown on the caller ID for some reason. With Spidey carried by web skis, I guess riding the current in the wake of Superman's flight, maybe, they've arrived at a railroad yard, where Big Blue's super eyes have tracked energy residue, meaning this is where they'll find whoever pitted them against each other. Don't you ever stun yourself, Supes, old boy? Actually, no. I wasn't even surprised when I wiped out an entire galaxy with a single sneeze. Backing away, backing away. Spider-Man stealthily goes in first, encountering various traps, electrified walls, cutting wires, machine guns in the floor, but evades them with minimal harm. Supes gets impatient and goes a more direct route, as the heroes simultaneously find Otto and Lex, demanding to know where their lady friends are. Via a small monitor, Lois and MJ are shown shackled to a pillar, unharmed, though it looks like they're arguing about something. Lois refuses to admit that Lower Decks actually is canon with the rest of Star Trek, and not a canonically isolated parody series. The bad guys assure that the game isn't over. It hasn't yet begun! What? Are you kidding me? We're on page 64, and you're telling me we're still in a prologue? Gah! Is anyone else's ears ringing for no reason? The red and blue pair try to apprehend the villains, only to find they were holograms. Spidey tries to access data to find where they were being projected from, but is tossed aside by Super Breath, sparing him the blasts from these self-destructing computers, which Kent, of course, detected with his X-ray vision. And yet he didn't notice they were chatting with holograms.
Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
Anyway, between speed and photographic memory, Soups manages to put the machine back together in the blink of an eye, because I guess the heat and sparks from the detonation can just be given a super spit shine and work like new. With everything working, the coordinates indicate their foes are hiding out at Mount Kilimanjaro. With the prison escape and scheming for revenge, everything got so stressful they both agreed they could use a hideout with a nice relaxing view of the African plains. They arrive south of the famous mountain, and we get a scene that probably hasn't aged well. Meeting some Maasai warriors, Superman talks to them very simply with obvious hand gestures, how they came from the sky and seek evil men, when one of them, Nuchaka, recognizes the Kryptonian from his time in London, and speaks English just fine. He takes them to his father, the chief, who wants to trade any info he has that could help them out for a sample of Soups' abilities. That takes the form of Clark juggling several Maasai tribesmen.
Make it very quick, I'm about to vomit.
Afterwards, the chief offers their finest drink, milk mixed with cow blood, but the heroes politely and nervously decline. I don't think any malice was intended here, but it can be seen as perpetuating a false idea that people in certain other areas of the world, like the African continent, aren't as technologically or culturally advanced as Western civilization, even if Nuchaka seems to stand out as an exception. The larger problem people would have has often been the default for when American writers portray cultures they're not really informed about. Besides, with all his abilities, you would think Clark would know their language already.
Wizard.
For claving out.
Nuchaka guides them to Kilimanjaro, mentioning one of his fellow Maasai had disappeared here a few months back, which fueled rumors that it's haunted, so his people stayed away. Superman pulls a camouflage stone door from a boulder, suggesting that the missing warrior was taken by Lex Luthor. Well, sure, but the guy disappeared months ago, and Lex only broke out of prison yesterday. Are you saying he kidnapped some random dude in a loincloth and kept him in a cave just in case? I guess so, because the missing dude sneaks up on their guide and knocks him out, proving not only to be mind-controlled, but strong enough to tear through Spider-Man's webbing like tissue paper. He wields a sword that can cut through Superman's otherwise invulnerable hair, and the hero realizes that red sun radiation is at work, coordinating with Spider-Man to web up the manipulated warrior. He then changes the webbing's chemical balance to make it as dense as steel using his heat vision.
Not scientifically possible!
Yeah, since adhesives tend to lose their stickiness when introduced to heat, in my experience anyway, I'm guessing this would have to rely on some of the other ambiguous chemicals Peter puts into his signature tool. They head inside to find your standard villain base, with the wall-crawler even joking that Luthor watches too many James Bond movies. Lex Luthor isn't the sort of man you joke about, Spidey.
Jesse Eisenberg.
Hey, he's a good actor who did what he could with the material he had, and... fair point. Chapter 4, The Doomsday Decision, sees our heroes discover their foes have already left, with Cal having a pretty good idea where they went. Arby's. He'd never admit it, but Lex is crazy for their beef and cheddar sandwiches. The villains took a rocket to a satellite headquarters abandoned by the Injustice Gang, which is where Lois and Mary Jane were teleported. Since Luthor has to exposit the place to Otto, I guess that means he wasn't aware of it until now, so I guess not even he knew where the ladies were. Were the women transported in a way that put them in those manacles? That's precise transporting the Enterprise would envy. Baldy reveals the module he stole, which he installs into a console, promising it'll destroy their enemies and let them cash in on some serious blackmail.
It's the only way we'll get new seasons of Firefly.
We get an interlude with Jameson and Edge at a bar, complaining about their respective employees who are good at what they do, but not always the most reliable, like disappearing during the year's biggest story. They return to the conference where the ComLab satellite has launched. Once it's in place, everything goes smoothly, until Lex uses the module to basically hijack the orbiter. Superman arrives near ComLab alongside Spider-Man piloting a borrowed space shuttle. Because being towed on a web line into the upper atmosphere wearing a space helmet made of webbing would have been too much of a stretch even for this comic. Lex has fired a high-intensity laser at the Earth, causing furious winds and storms to erupt in Middle America, which could eventually lead to greater ecological disaster.
Power of lightning, strike again!
Power of web shooters! Get real sticky!
Stopping it is a job for Superman's face. as he blocks the beam with his moneymaker, which knocks him out. It's later explained that ultrasonics were used in the beam as well. Spidey tries to assist, but the laser knocks out his life support, leading him to black out. They wake up in the Injustice Gang base, where Luthor explains his intentions to let the storm center engulf the planet unless the US government pays him $10 billion. He said, raising his pinky to his lips and ordering that the do-gooders be fed to sharks with freaking laser beams attached to their heads. Our hero's only option is to leap at each other's nemesis, despite their grogginess, which Lex thinks is impossible, but he's said that a time or two already, so he shouldn't be that surprised. He shuts off the gravity, meaning Spider-Man's webs aren't as effective, and with Superman still dazed from the beam, Ock throws him at the webhead. When Octavius grabs him, Supes employs an oriental style of fighting that involves using your opponent's move against them. In this case, pulling two of the Doctor's mechanical arms out of their sockets and throwing him against the wall. The style in question isn't named, maybe because there are a few that have that very premise. Spidey knocks Lex around a bit. Considering how strong Parker is, Luthor really can take a punch, and they notice a tsunami about to hit the East Coast. As he's grabbed by Doc Ock, the webhead tells his caped compadre to hustle back to terra firma.
Can you hold the fort alone?
Does Warner Brothers make movies? Wait, I forgot about David Zaslav. Bad example, sorry.
Supes escapes the base, feeling that Luthor's finally gone full cuckoo banana nutters. And he may just be right, since Baldy starts bragging about how he wanted the planet destroyed for not recognizing what a genius smarty pants boy he is. Spider-Man asks Ock where he's gonna spend his ransom money with no Earth, and the now six-armed Doctor figures his partner in crime is just a bit too loony to work with. He smashes the console, destroying the stolen module and its control of ComLab, also knocking out all the premium cable channels for the entire country. As Lex attacks Octavius for his treachery, Superman catches up with the enormous tidal wave about to eradicate the East Coast, with Spidey hoping he'll be able to stop it. If not, goodbye Boston, goodbye New York, goodbye Washington. Well, I guess you get the point. No goodbyes for Rhode Island, though. You know what you did. Clark flies at Mach 3 to create a wall of sound, nullifying the mile-high, 200-mile-long wave, just as Spider-Man delivers a deciding punch to Luthor's face. They later land on a rooftop with the webbed-up villains and freed love interests. Spidey figures it was luck that his girl was nabbed along with Lois, though Supes thinks maybe it was destiny, as the two take their respective foes to the proper authorities. Living legends hoping to meet again someday, leaving behind the women they were previously so desperate to find. Lois at least should be used to this by now. We get an epilogue where each hero returns to a civilian identity, having already set up their respective cameras to catch their spandex selves in victorious return to Earth, and they later happen to meet at the same restaurant with their bosses and not girlfriends. Peter and Clark shake hands, remarking about not having seen each other while recording Spidey in Big Blue.
Yeah, but I think we should do the mega happy ending.
Oh, the mega happy ending, that's doable.
Jonah and Morgan are so pleased with these unreliable journalists. Kent may anchor the convention after all, Parker might get a raise, and the comic finally ends with the heroes, MJ and Lois, heading out arm in arm to grab some dinner on their boss's dimes. That was Superman vs. the Amazing Spider-Man, and it was a pretty fun story, though perhaps on the long side. Not counting the covers, a page showing the process of the front cover, and the identifications, it comes out at 83 pages. It's understandable, two very popular heroes from different publishers meeting up as if they'd always existed in the same universe. It was the first of its type, leading to numerous other collaborations between Marvel and DC for almost 30 years after. This was kind of a big deal, and not only does the story do a good job of supporting that statement, with Luthor's plans getting bigger in scope until things get out of control, but the art does a great job of contributing to that notion as well. Detailing on buildings and wide shots is spectacular, no spider pun intended, and characters are wonderfully expressive, especially when Jonah is barely holding back his fury.
Crazy eyes?
Splash pages show the weight of a scene, like Spidey being hurled back just by the current of air from Superman's restrained punch, without feeling like it's wasting space. The same is true of most of the two-page spreads, feeling necessary like when the heroes first meet, or the hijacking of ComLab, happening in mere moments. There are some really neat, classic sci-fi designs that, not to sound cynical, kind of look like they were designed to be real-life toys. The flying octopus, Lex's giant robot, and the walking underwater base, complete with battering ram claw action.
How toyetic can you get?
Mind Control Maasai Tribesmen sold separately. It can walk a fine line between ludicrous and clever. Web skiing in the sky, the dubiousness of some heat vision making Parker's webbing like steel, how Luthor managed to smuggle in all those mechanical components, hand-waving how easily he imitated Supes, but with teleportation eyes. Yet many of Luthor's countermeasures to Superman's abilities nicely accentuate his intellect, like powerful sonics, or utilizing an imitation of Krypton's red sun to balance out the big hero fight of misunderstanding. They offer some very reasonable limitations so that mere mortals last more than 5 seconds against someone so powerful. If you're wondering why they didn't just try throwing a certain green rock at him, that's because in 1971, a few years before this story, DC decided to have all of Earth's kryptonite turned to iron, feeling it was overused, so writers would have to find other ways to challenge or limit Superman. As much as I think the story largely works fine as it is, I did find a few drawbacks. Doc Ock felt more along for the ride, with villainous activities largely involving Luthor's equipment and resources. Otto's genius too, so you'd think there'd be more co-action on some weapon or tool to impede our heroes. He was frequently left in the dark on Lex's plans, and even though one thought bubble showed he was willing to take that 10 billion ransom for himself, when Lex was willing to destroy the world because his genius wasn't recognized, Ock's choice to fight him, while a tad rushed, made sense. There seemed to be a kind of parallel in the hero's prologues, where each makes some kind of error that benefits the villain. Clark not thinking to backtrack the robot's path earlier, and Peter being more cavalier when fighting Ock. This seems pretty intentional, not just as setup for the foes joining forces, but that despite the difference in power, both Pete and Clark are capable of making mistakes. One accidentally leaves his web shooters in the laundry, the other collapses a building by lightly bumping into it. Same thing, right folks? Pitting the do-gooders against each other did seem to rely a lot more on luck the more I thought about it. Sure, posing as Supes is fine, and abducting Lois Lane is a tried-and-true way of getting the real caped deal on the scene. But Mary Jane seemed taken by pure chance. Wrong place, wrong time kind of deal. There was never any mention of her association with the guy who always gets pics of Spider-Man, thereby making it necessary to take her too. Neither Luthor nor Octavius seemed to have any kind of actual plan or logic to draw the webhead out, other than, we would have to assume, the strange circumstance of Superman making 2 women vanish for no reason, and hoping that news got to Spidey quickly so he would show up at the same time as the Kryptonian so they could duke it out. Which was kind of the basis of the entire evil scheme. And bit of a tangent, why does Parker refer to himself as a boy unironically? Maybe it was Marvel editors not wanting him to appear too old, but he's almost done with college, so you would think someone in his early 20s would want to be considered an adult, especially if he wants more respect from his boss. Or was he thinking that calling himself a boy photographer would help deflect suspicion that he could possibly be Spider-Man? Now, back to the length of the book. I'll admit, part of my criticism of that stems from having to go through it for this review, trying to whittle it down as best I can, which still resulted in using over 70 pages. That aside, I do think some things could have been cut. Each hero gets 15 or so pages of prologue, and I think they could have been trimmed down, even if they do work for establishing them to unfamiliar readers. Maybe 1 or 2 of the 2-page spreads, like Spidey going through the traps in the old railway station, could have been just 1 page, and you could probably cut out the whole thing with the Maasai tribe, since I don't think it really added anything except some unintentional stereotyping. Our heroes could have just gone straight to the lair, found the entrance, and fought a robot with some variant of the red sun gimmick. Heck, that would probably mean Spidey would have to save Supes, balancing things out a bit more. I would have liked more done with MJ and Lois beyond being used as bait. It seemed like there could have been setup for them to interact more, seeing as they're both strong-willed, and one panel made it look like they were arguing, but it's never expanded upon. If Mary Jane really thought Lane was stealing her man, maybe they could have had some discourse, delve into how MJ really feels about Peter, and explain to those who weren't collecting Spider-Man at the time why she seems simultaneously possessive and somewhat non-committal. It possesses some elements of its time, some dated references, certain phrases used a bit redundantly, and maybe a minor coloring error or two. Yet it is still an entertaining story with great art, some good humor, and delightful interactions. Its positives absolutely outweigh its negatives, and I suggest checking it out. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.